here. And we will start from, maybe I'll ask Vincent to start from him, and then we will move on.
Well, hi everyone, and thanks Victoria for organizing that. So before we start, and I know this is about international divorces, what I wanted to highlight is that the child abduction issue in Japan does not discriminate. It's not gender-based, as Karina will be able to demonstrate, and it's not a nationality or a race issue, because it impacts everyone, literally everyone in Japan, and international couples make up maybe 2 to 3% of the actual child abduction issue in Japan. The only difference is that foreigners tend to be a lot more vocal and advocate a lot louder than Japanese people when it comes to defending the rights of their children. So as far as I'm concerned, well, I'm a French citizen. I've been living and working in Japan for the last 16 years. I'm still married to a Japanese woman with whom I have 2 children, and that 2 children that were abducted nearly 4 years ago. So in June 2018, I brought up the divorce matter to my wife because we had couples issues, which she refused to, saying that there was no need to get divorced. The couple quarrels continued, and in August 2018, the same year, I hired a lawyer for both my wife and I, and asked the lawyer by email, copying my wife, to start the process of divorce in an amicable way in order to isolate the children from that noise. The lawyer contacted my spouse, and she refused to, she told him that she didn't want to get divorced. And 2 weeks later, on August 10th, 2018, I got home from work, and the house had been emptied, and I haven't seen my children ever since. So nearly 4 years ago. I haven't been able to communicate to my wife ever since. And I don't even have a proof of life of my children. Even the French embassy has requested the Japanese authorities to get news about my children, because they also hold a French passport. And the Japanese authorities have refused any cooperation with the French authorities. So as of today, we have 2 French children on Japanese soil that we cannot confirm whether they're alive or not. So I didn't know that issue at all, even though I had been living in Japan for 12 years at the time. I started doing some research on the internet, and I found out that there was a high likelihood that I would never see my children again. So, of course, on the first day, I called the lawyer, and I tried to have him involved, to call the police so they could come and witness the abduction of the children. And he basically told me that they wouldn't care, and they don't really care. So we started a case in, well, as soon as my children had been abducted, my wife actually started a divorce process, which she had been refusing for 3 months. And the point is that, once you secure custody of the children, they're basically, and I hate saying that, but they're yours. Children in Japan are not considered as human beings. And that's literally how the Japanese courts qualify children. They're property of the household. And because the children had been moved to a house where I did not belong to, they were no longer my property. So it's been 4 years, I'm still married. I still have the same parental rights as my wife, no restriction whatsoever. And I still cannot approach my children. And if I do so, I would be arrested on kidnapping attempt, which is what the Japanese police threatened me in front of my lawyers and French officials. Again, even though I still have full parental right. And this threat is actually very real, because an Australian father spent 45 days in jail 2 years ago, trying to see his children after they had been abducted. So I realized that the Japanese, there is no infrastructure in Japan to prevent the abduction of a child and the alienation. And that's the main difference between Japan and the rest of the world, whereby child abduction and alienation was not invented by the Japanese. They cannot put a patent on it. It happens everywhere in the world. But anywhere outside of Japan, there is an infrastructure that protects the children. In Japan, the various state organs are actually promoting and incentivizing the abduction. The judges are ruling in favor of the abducting parents. The police refuses to take our complaint for abduction, and in return threaten us of arrest on kidnapping attempt if we just try to get near our children. So it is really the opposite from the rest of the world. And so for me, I knew that I wouldn't be able to get my children through the Japanese system. So I leveraged the fact that I was a foreigner, and I could do that in different ways. And it was also for me a coping mechanism where, I've had to grieve to grieve the loss of my children on a daily basis for the last 4 years. But by fighting back, I found a purpose. And I, for me, it's a way to still be a father to my children, even though I cannot be there for them, but I'm still trying to fulfill my obligation towards them. So in terms of action that I've taken, I filed a criminal complaint for child abduction and child abuse in France in May 2019. And in October of last year, the French court issued an Interpol arrest warrant for both child abduction and child abuse, an international arrest warrant, which the Japanese authorities are refusing to respect. In June of 2019, after lobbying, I've met with President Macron when he came to Japan for the G20. And that day he spoke to the Japanese Prime Minister Abe-san of the time about the issue of my 2 children, but other children as well. And Abe-san replied that there was nothing he could do. In August of 2019, with the help of a human rights lawyer based in Paris, Jessica Finel, we filed a complaint to the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, which is the highest human rights instance in the world, really. And we filed a complaint against Japan for gross violation of human rights, stipulating that Japan was grossly violating the Convention on the Right of the Child, which stipulates that child abduction should be banned for any purpose and under any form, and that a child has the right to maintain a regular and personal relationship with both parents. In February of 2020, after petitioning the European Parliament, I was invited to Brussels to present the issue of child abduction in Japan in front of the Parliament. And in July of 2020, the Parliament voted almost unanimously a resolution asking Japan in those terms to put an end to the abduction of European children in Japan. Unfortunately, the day after that resolution was voted on, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan, Motegi-san, organized a press conference denying any wrongdoings from Japan. And then finally, last summer, I started a hunger strike, which lasted 21 days during the Olympics to raise awareness about the issue of child abduction. And to me, it was very powerful, not in a way that media started reporting about it, because they eventually, domestic medias, which was a big win, started reporting about the issue. But it was really the fact that people started speaking out. And I was staying in front of the Olympic Stadium, so I was sleeping there. I was there 24 hours. So I had people visiting me from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and including Karina. And thanks again for your support. And what really touched me is, the people who came, the number of people that were impacted and how bad the situation was. On the 8th of the hunger strike, I had a group of 20 moms from 5 different countries, from Poland, Russia, Australia, Japan, and the US, who came and testified that they had been the victim of child abduction themselves from their Japanese husband, and that they had not seen their children for, some of them, for 7 or 8 years. Every day I had parents, I also had children actually coming, Japanese children who had been abducted by either their mom or dad, and they hadn't seen the other parent for years. And they came to see me, to talk to me, and they really, like, they were in tears for half an hour to an hour, and they had no places for them to speak about that. And this is also an issue that, the Japanese authorities are refusing to put in place a system to host these children and help them heal with the situation. And since the hunger strike, I've had 5 children who actually reached out to me directly to tell me that they realized during the hunger strike what happened to them. Because in other society outside of Japan, if you live in a monoparental family, you wonder what happened to the other parents. And you actually have the tools to look for the other parents or try to understand what happened. And the society allows you to do so and encourages you to look for your other parent. In Japan, it's very normal to not know one of the parents. One out of 4 children is abducted and alienated in Japan. So when you go to school as a child, you talk about your situation and it's very common. But I think the hunger strike through the media has actually had that impact where people have realized that they had been the victim of a child abduction. And these children who came to me, one of them, for example, had been abducted from her American father 12 years before the hunger strike. And as she was reading the news last summer, she realized what happened to her, and that it was not normal. So she started tracking down her dad, found her dad, reconnected with him, and they've been just chatting ever since. And she's going to meet him in the next few months. So, I think the issue that we're facing here is that there is no structure in Japan to prevent that from happening and to also heal it. So that's also why I co-founded an NGO called Find My Parents, where we're running podcasts. The title of our podcast, or You're Double, because you come from both parents, and in some cases, you also have 2 different nationalities, 2 different culture. And we're trying to reach out to the masses in Japan so they can, speak out. We really need to create some sort of movement for people to solve that issue. We've also created a tool that relies on artificial intelligence where abducted children and parents who have been the victim of child parental abduction can enter some details, and the algorithm behind looks for to make a match, basically based on various conditions. So there's a lot of efforts to be made, but I would say one thing is recently, last week in Japan, an official survey was published stating that 85% of the people who had been surveyed wanted children to have access to their parents in the event of a divorce. So clearly the mindset in Japan is here. It's just the problem is stuck with the authorities.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. We will return to this, to the idea of NGO and about the idea of finding parents and finding children. Thank you very much. And we will move to Karina now, maybe 10 minutes. So Karina will be speaking in Russian. So those of you who do not understand Russian, please switch to interpretation function. Карина, пожалуйста.
Да. Добрый день, здравствуйте. Меня зовут Кахьяни Карина. Моя история началась 21 октября 2017 года. Суд по разводу еще продолжается, но я уже утратила право опеки в доразводный период, то есть муж уже стал опекуном ребенка. За это время я подавала в различные суды, чтобы вернуть сына и чаще его видеть, более 35 судов. Более 35 раз. Один иск в Японии стоимость около 5500 евро, то есть это огромные деньги для простого человека. К сожалению, многие из них были проиграны. Только по причине того, что муж, используя ложное обвинение, наврал полиции о домашнем насилии. На основании этого посадил меня в тюрьму на 21 день. И после этого муж продержал ребенка в своей новой квартире, адрес, который мне не сообщали и не давали мне встречи с ребенком более 6 месяцев. И только поэтому он получил право опеки над ребенком. К сожалению, это очень широко практикующаяся ситуация в Японии, основанная на ложных показаниях, используется адвокатами по разводу в 80% случаев в Японии. Даже если совершения домашнего насилия не было, нет никаких доказательств, достаточно в полиции будет просто устного заявления, то есть фактически ложного обвинения. Полиция не требует никаких доказательств. Обвинение в домашнем насилии позволяет адвокату супруга, который заявил о домашнем насилии первым, выиграть в суде все, даже без доказательств. Доказать, что ты не совершал домашнее насилие, невозможно. Даже если есть решение о невиновности от полиции, но факт ареста уже накладывает отпечаток и выносит как бы виновность косвенную в суде. То есть вы уже в тени, получается. Доказать невиновность невозможно. Детей похищают специально, чтобы получить опеку. На самом деле это не происходит от большой любви или заботы к ребенку. Естественно, мы сейчас не говорим о ситуациях, когда была реальная угроза жизни ребенка от одного из родителей. В основном стремление стать опекуном движет исключительно материальный вопрос. В Японии после развода опекун имеет права на большую часть совместно нажитого имущества и алименты. После развода многие дети начинают страдать от действия опекуна. Есть даже дети, которые погибли от действия опекуна. Как правило, родитель, похитивший ребенка, второй раз выходит замуж или женится. И есть случаи, когда с позволения родителя-опекуна начинались издевательства от нового супруга над этим ребенком. К сожалению, родитель, потерявший право опеки, не знает о жизни своего ребенка, не может никак вмешаться в данную ситуацию и помочь своему ребенку. Мнения детей в школе будут игнорироваться. Есть случаи, когда дети погибали. Это даже по телевизору показывали в Японии. В Японии нет органа, который отслеживал бы жизнь ребенка под опекой одного из родителей. То есть там все спущено на самотек. Так. Если, вот как уже Винсент говорил, что если родитель, потерявший опеку, захочет увидеть своего ребенка или как-то поговорить с ним, или приблизиться просто к забору школы или детского сада, просто посмотреть, потому что многие дети не видят своих родителей годами, только потому что опекун не разрешает. Он будет арестован полицией, то есть садик, руководство садика, руководство школы или больницы, в которой попадет ребенок, вызывает полицию, и человек может быть задержан просто потому, что он захотел увидеть своего ребенка от года до 15 лет. То есть ему могут вменять даже похищение ребенка. То есть фактически он просто хотел увидеть своего ребенка. Достаточно приблизиться меньше, чем на метр, вы получите 15 лет за попытку похищения. То есть это абсурдная ситуация на самом деле. Так, как правило, к разводу готовится человек, у которого есть причины на развод, который хочет развода не просто так. В моей ситуации мой муж был пойман на измене. Фактически, это была не первая измена. И у нас был брачный контракт, основываясь на котором в случае неверности ему грозили огромные выплаты, и он должен был оставить мне очень весомое имущество, также право опеки и алименты. Чтобы избежать всего этого, мой муж с его адвокатом, адвокат был нанят за месяц до ситуации, когда произошел вызов полиции. То есть все спланировано на самом деле. Ну, когда мой муж эту ситуацию решил применить со своим адвокатом, вот ложное обвинение в домашнем насилии, арест при помощи полиции, я уже в полиции начала понимать, что что-то здесь совершенно не так, потому что я не совершала насилие к мужу. Я любила своего мужа, я неоднократно спасла ему жизнь, он у меня очень такой человек, любящий выпить. И, к сожалению, такие люди становятся опекунами чаще, чем любящий родитель, потому что любящий родитель никогда не лишит своего ребенка права на счастливое детство. А ребенок, он по праву рождения обязан общаться с обоими родителями. Это его законное право от рождения, не лишаться ни отца, ни матери. Однако родителя-похитителя, к сожалению, это никогда не волнует. Он действует исключительно из своей выгоды. И в Японии это очень-очень поощряется и поощряется в полиции, потому что полиция советует, когда вы приходите в полицию и говорите, я хочу развестись, первое, что вам скажет полиция, пожалуйста, снимите квартиру отдельную, в другом районе желательно, чтобы вас не нашли, то есть чтобы вас второй супруг не нашел. И второе, заберите своего ребенка, ценные вещи и переезжайте. Третьим пунктом напишите заявление о домашнем насилии, тогда полиция официально скроет ваш адрес от второго супруга. И если второй супруг попытается как-то вернуть своего ребенка, он будет арестован. То есть это такая схема фактически. Если уже идет обвинение в домашнем насилии, а оно идет, как правило, сразу, то уже как-то избежать этой схемы невозможно. Это замкнутый круг. Все. И даже если вы его не совершали, даже если вы не виноваты, вас втягивают специально в эту систему, чтобы вы не имели права выиграть в суде. То есть кто первый соврал, кто первый похитил, тот, получается, и прав. К сожалению, здесь вообще не идет даже речи о правах человека, потому что, как уже сказал Винсент, доказать, что вы невиновны, невозможно. А далее я хотела бы привести, доказать, мое мнение о нарушении прав человека в Японии по пунктам, чтобы было более кратко. Как я это вижу? Я хотела бы, чтобы мировое сообщество обратило на это внимание, потому что, к сожалению, ни слова Винсента, ни слова других родителей, большая часть которой составляют японцы, не воспринимаются правящей партией всерьез. На прошлой неделе правящая партия заявила, что они готовы к судебной системе в Японии, вот, чтобы ограничить вот эти похищения детей. Но они уже заявляют это в течение 10 лет. То есть это просто слова, что они никогда не изменят эту систему, потому что похищение детей на самом деле это огромнейший черный многомиллиардный рынок. Здесь замешаны не только полиция, судебная система и адвокаты. Нет, не только. Здесь замешаны еще многие-многие структуры. Они как паутинка. И вырваться из нее уже невозможно. То есть вас там просто размелят, и от вашей жизни ничего не останется. Я еще хотела бы немножко дополнить, что когда я начала, все-таки, когда я вернулась домой, узнала, что сына у меня похитили, я обратилась в полицию с заявлением о том, чтобы мой сын похищен. Пожалуйста, примите заявление. Полиция смеялась мне в лицо, полицейские. Мне отказали в подаче заявления, то есть уже нарушение прав матери. И полицейские, когда я расплакалась от безысходности, они мне сказали, что ты можешь представить, что твоего мужа, ребенка больше нет в живых. Для меня это был шок. Это как такое вообще можно сказать? Это ужасно. И еще, когда я начала проверять, кем является адвокат моего мужа, я заказала специальное расследование, чтобы узнать, кто этот человек. Я была шокирована еще больше. Этот человек принимал участие в лекциях о домашнем насилии в отделении полиции, в том, которое меня арестовало. Также все бракоразводные процессы этого человека, которые заходят в суд, это большая часть, основывается на обвинении оппонента в домашнем насилии. К сожалению, в суде подобные документы не сыграли никакой роли, потому что в основном суд знает, что все обвинения в домашнем насилии, большинство из них, это ложные обвинения. То есть они поддерживают эту систему и дают право выиграть тому человеку, кто первый наврал о домашнем насилии. Это ужасно, это жестоко. Вы никак не сможете себя оправдать. Далее я приведу по пунктам. Значит, первое, что касается полиции. Получить арест на 21 день в Японии можно без доказательств. Просто по письменному доносу одного из супругов. Вас арестуют. После 21 дня вас выпустят, вот как в моем случае, с решением о том, что я невиновна. Однако, так как вас уже продержали в полиции, а держали вас на основании того, что вы якобы сможете куда-то убежать, что само собой абсурдно, зачем мне бежать, куда мне бежать, то вы уже являетесь в серой зоне для суда. То есть, как суд сказал мне, раз был арест, значит, вас в чем-то заподозрили. Я говорю, ну я же невиновна, у меня есть доказательства, что я невиновна, у меня есть официальная бумага из полиции, что я невиновна, и все расследования в отношении меня закончены и возобновлению не подлежат. На что мне в суде сказали, ну был же арест, понимаете, это замкнутый круг. То есть оправдаться уже никак невозможно. Угу. Да. Дальше второе. Суд по опеке длится около года, но решение будет вынесено в пользу того, кто продержал ребенка у себя 6 месяцев. Тоже это просто абсурд. Шестое. Родитель не может дать встречи с ребенком, опекун, если просто захочет. Мнение ребенка, даже если он скажет проверяющим, что он хочет видеть своего родителя, никого не волнует, абсолютно. Это будет игнорироваться судом. Как скажет опекун, так и будет. Четвертое, служба опеки, которая проверяет детей, они не записывают никаким ни видео, ни аудио образом, что говорит ребенок. Это нарушение. То есть правдивость протокола, который напишет проверяющий, проверить невозможно, а по этому протоколу выносится основное решение суда. Как правило, там очень много нарушений. Мой сын сказал, что отец пьет и подверг его жизни опасности, проверяющая не внесла это в протокол. Это тоже ужасно. Также навязывает в судах действия сторонней организации на встречах, фактически вымогая деньги за встречу с ребенком со своим, ты должна заплатить. Сторонняя организация пишет сначала 2 хороших отчета, 3 обязательно плохой, чтобы вы никогда не покинули эту стороннюю организацию. Это бизнес, вас просто втягивают умышленно в новые судебные процессы. И последнее, что я хотела бы сказать, что в Японии почему-то не рассматривают брачный контракт, хотя он был заключен и заверен в соответствии со всеми международными требованиями согласия обеих сторон. К сожалению, в моем контракте написано, право опеки принадлежит мне, и также было написано алименты, количество встреч полностью, но суд сказал, что мы не будем это рассматривать, нас это не интересует. То есть они поддерживают систему похищения детей, для них это основной приоритет выноса решения по опеке. К сожалению, изменить что-то невозможно. И суд сказал, что если ты хочешь право опеки хоть как-то в контракте рассмотреть, обращайся в новый суд. А чтобы обратиться в новый суд, надо признать развод. А после развода автоматически муж становится опекуном. Фактически я теряю все. Я теряю деньги, я теряю ребенка, я теряю всю свою жизнь. 10 лет было потеряно впустую. И я никогда не избавлюсь от ареста. И то есть во всем сообществе я буду виновник домашнего насилия. Представляете, какой ужас. Спасибо большое. Да.
Спасибо, Карина, за то, что поделились вашей историей. Okay, so thank you very much. I will ask everybody just to present their points of view, and then we will have later time for conversation. Just one moment is that looks like our attendees sent messages to the chat. If you would like to send your questions, please use Q&A section. And one more point is there is interest to the NGO that Vincent is working on, and Vincent would like to share this information on what they're doing in their organization. So if you're interested, please send us message with your email address where you would like us to contact you to share this information, so we do not violate your privacy by just using your emails that you provided us. Thank you very much. And I'll ask Jeff to introduce international divorces. He will be talking about Filipinos cases here. Thank you, Jeff. Your mic is
yes. Good morning to everyone, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present the case of Filipinos. I have a PowerPoint, so I'll share that just a minute. All right. Basically, I will be sharing a different aspect of this issue, which somehow complements what have been presented earlier. So I'm talking about Filipinos, particularly in this presentation. We can just look around very quickly on this issue of international marriages and divorce. As you can see, quite a number of divorces involving international marriages all throughout the years. And Japanese Filipino divorces would constitute quite a number, as you can see, from 25% to almost 26% in 2007, which went down a bit up to 2019, at least to 23%, but still quite high if you will take note of this figure. And then, as you can see here, in terms of the profile of the gender, most of the divorced Filipino spouses are women. Basically, they constitute a lot of around 30 to around 30% or more. In relation to Filipino men, you have much less. And then again, just to show you this broad picture of where we situate these marriages between Japanese and Filipinos and the divorces that happen all throughout the years. Now, another aspect of this is that there are problems involved, and the discussion about domestic violence is very much an issue. As you can see, this is a report that I got, a little dated, but still reflective of what's going on in relation to issues regarding domestic violence. As you can see here, there is one report that was gathered relating to domestic violence at the national level. And you can see quite a number happening from 2014 to 2017 in different modes: personal visit, telephone call, or others. And again, for Filipinos, we constitute quite a lot of such consultations made. As you can see here, we're almost 1/3 of those consultations made regarding domestic violence at the national level. So you can see, again, quite a big amount of cases involving domestic violence, about Filipinos being victims of domestic violence, being reported or consulted at least. I'm not saying they are resolved. I'm simply saying people ask about their cases and what they can do about those cases of domestic violence. Now, if you go to a more specific area, and I'm referring to Toyonaka City here in Kansai, in Osaka, where you can see consultations also were made by Filipinos. And you can see the first 4 issues that have been consulted by Filipinos from 2013 to 2020 would be divorce, child custody, domestic violence, and Japanese citizenship acquisition. Now, these are issues that very much related to what we're talking about. Divorce, probably they have been divorced and they don't know what happened, or they are threatened with divorce, or maybe they're even themselves thinking about divorce. And so they want to know what to do and how what will happen to them in case they get into divorce. Child custody is another problem. And probably, again, this can be cases of child abduction. This can be cases of them trying to keep their children because the custody right has been given to the other spouse, the husband. And again, you can have domestic violence of various forms, physical or psychological. Now, the Japanese citizenship acquisition is a problem that can be a result of all of this, from divorce to domestic violence, that the Japanese husband failed to register, for example, properly the birth of their children. And therefore, there's not enough documentation, no kosekito, nor family register records that would show that they are children of Japanese parents. So this happened especially for those who were born outside of Japan, for example, in the Philippines. And the Japanese husband and also the Filipino parent were not able to do the proper thing of registering the birth of the children. Therefore, they have a problem of Japanese acquisition. Citizenship acquisition. Okay, there are other cases, unpaid wages, other labor issues, and so on. Human rights violations. Okay. In terms of fraudulent divorce, again, this is a case that has been talked about quite a number of times. I'm not sure if people are familiar with this case of fraudulent divorce, where in the case of divorce by agreement, where you can just go to the city hall and file your application for divorce with or without the presence of the other spouse, and then it got approved. And under the law, they're supposed to be there to apply together because they have to show that they agreed to the divorce. But then again, even the law itself would say, even if that was not followed, and even if there are no witnesses, as long as the forms have been completed, and they think that everything is okay, including those things about property and custody and so on, then they get approved. And the moment it's approved, that's it. You have no way of canceling it because it has been approved. And so therefore, they call it fraudulent precisely because they never agreed to it. They never knew that it happened. So I will talk about it also later. So again, you can see here from 2010 to 2013, things are really getting reported or consulted with institutions such as Atoms. And then it went on increasing through the years. Now, let me just point out that this is just a case of one city in Japan. If you try to compile the different information from different cities with such institutions such as Atoms, which is an international center that non-Japanese can go to for help, for information and other assistance, who knows how many of these fraudulent cases, fraudulent divorce cases have been consulted, and who knows the extent. So at the moment, I don't have the idea or the information regarding the amount or the number of divorces that have been made by especially by the Japanese spouse. Okay, so just to sum up a bit the statistics that I just mentioned, you can see that there's a significant number of divorces with Japanese spouse through the years, from 23 to 25% out of the total number of such divorces. And you can see that there is also quite a number of consultation regarding domestic violence. And then also a consultation regarding children in terms of support, in terms of education, in terms of nationality or citizenship. Okay, now I have a number of cases, just 3 cases, just to illustrate what happened to some Filipinos in terms of divorces. Now, in case 1, this is a case of finding her child. A Filipina married a Japanese and gave birth to a child, but the husband got debts and was hiding from debtors. And so he didn't work, and then she worked to support the family until this debtor started disturbing them. And so she finally said, please, let's have a divorce to spare you and me and the child of the trouble. And then but then again, before the divorce came, the husband disappeared with the child. So there's no divorce yet, but the husband disappeared. And then she had to extend her spousal visa, but the immigration said no. Why? Because you don't have the custody of her child. But she was very desperate. So she said, well, if you're not going to give me my visa, I will just overstay. And she did, in order for her to really find the husband and also find the child. But she couldn't find her until after 6 years, when she was able to contact the husband and see the child, 9 years old at this time. And then, but after that, he disappeared again, they disappeared again. And then later on, she found her child, daughter, 28 years old already, on Facebook. So she stayed for 30 years just to be able to find her child. This is one case, until finally she decided to surrender and went back to the Philippines. Case number 2 is about fraudulent divorce. A Japanese met a Filipina and then followed her to the Philippines, got married, and then had two children. They had a business, very good, until a typhoon destroyed it. And then the husband went back to Japan and then disappeared. Now she and her child went to Japan with the child having Japanese citizenship, so no problem going to Japan. But she went here because she wanted to support the family, and she was able to get the job as caregiver. But then again, she never knew that she was divorced until she was here in Japan. Even the family of the husband didn't know that they were divorced. Apparently, they're in good contact, the Filipina and the family of the husband. So finally, she was able to get the husband to contact him, and then they agreed to meet. And the husband also agreed to support the child, the second child who was sick. So in this case, at least the husband is the one seeking to beat the child. It's not only that the child is being abandoned, but it's the husband wanting now to see the child. Okay. Third case is another fraudulent divorce case. It's a Filipina who married a Japanese in the Philippines and have 2 children. But before the second child was born, the husband went back to Japan and disappeared. Now, the birth of these children were fortunately registered with the Japanese government through the Japanese consulate in Manila. And she was able to come to Japan because of the new type of visa, which was introduced by Japan to allow the supposed children to go back to Japan or to gain, to work for their citizenship by having the parents accompany them. But actually, this is just a case of, finding workers for the Japanese industry, especially the caregiving industry. But anyway, with this new visa, a lot of Filipino women were able to return to Japan, accompanying their children, either as Japanese citizen or qualified to apply for Japanese citizenship. Again, when in Japan, that's what she found out, that she was divorced. And the custody of their children, at least the firstborn, was in the name of the former Japanese husband. And then she found out that this husband was receiving the support that was given to the child by the local government. And precisely, I suppose, this is one of the reasons why the husband wanted the custody, at least in paper, in his name, so that he get the benefit out of that by applying with the local government for the child support, without the child being present and without the local government asking, where is the child? You have the custody, then can you show us, tell us? And, then you find out that you're really in custody, but the child was in the Philippines. But then this happened. Anyway, the problem, the good thing is that despite the fact that the Japanese husband refused to cooperate, she was able to work it out that the custody of the firstborn was transferred to her, in order that she will be able to get support for the child, and also for every other things that she needed, because of school and other things would require her approval in all the transactions that are needed with the government. Now, these cases would indicate the problem of abandonment of the Filipino wife and her child. This is a case not unlike the other cases of the Japanese spouse getting away from them. This is a case of the Filipino wife and children being abandoned. And of course, the use of fraudulent divorce to abandon them. Now, I just also want to say that there are many cases of Japanese Filipino children who also were abandoned by the Japanese parents, who are now suffering poverty and discrimination. In the Philippines, there are still cases of children like this who are being discriminated, especially because they don't have the Japanese parent and they are poor. Okay. There are also reports of Japanese Filipino children who are suffering right here in Japan because they came here without knowing the Japanese language, and there's no support. The Filipino parent cannot afford or cannot assist them in their education, in their homework or whatever, and dealing with the school and so on. So they suffer, and some of them actually have big problems of not going to school anymore because of this problem. Okay, so the consequences are, based on the cases that I've presented, as for the foreign spouse, there's this visa problem, as in this case. They simply would not be able to get an extension of the spousal visa because they were divorced, or even if they can, the immigration would tell them, how are you going to support yourself without your husband? So you have this problem of financial support that they need. And if they have never worked because they were staying at home, how can they ever get the support? And even if they get the extension and they cannot work, then how can they work on their cases if they want to file or run after this their former husband? In terms of the children, you have problem of support again, because the father would not want, or the Japanese parent would not want to support the child. Nationality, in case the records are not properly done, and of course education, because support is needed for the education of children, especially here in Japan. And then the third point is that there is a difficulty in resolving issues, and I've heard that also in the previous presentations about how do you resolve this problem? How are you going to get the information? What rights are you going to assert? And how are you going to assert? So these are basically the problems that came out. So in terms of human rights, as mentioned earlier, basically to me, one of the basic problems is how to seek remedy for your problems. And I think this has been clearly presented by our two panelists earlier, how to also earn and work a living. Because if you are just a spouse who stayed home and then suddenly you have no husband and family, then you're in problem. Children, survival and development. I am very much impressed with this possibility of abuse of children who are in the custody of the former husband or spouse. because that is very possible that their survival and development will be affected by this situation. Of course, under the law, they're not under the Convention on the Human Rights, they're not supposed to be separated from the parents. As much as possible, they should be together. That's the idea of raising the children, nationality and education, as I mentioned earlier. So again, the main issue about resolving issues is legal protection, legal assistance. Lawyers are very expensive. Who will help you out? There's Hoteras, but Hoteras also is a system where you have to pay back later on. So it's not entirely free. And the legal mechanism, how are you going to make sure that this will be remedied through the proper systems? And I've heard that the system is not there, or at least the system is not good enough to counter this problem. Now, this is especially true of disadvantaged people. And I'm saying these are non-Japanese spouses who are abandoned by their Japanese husbands, who will be suffering the most. Okay, because of this, I would like to just end with some solutions. First of all, I'll use the same remedy issues by saying legal protection. Again, I think I've heard of this before, the need for law reform in order for this protection against this unlawful, fraudulent divorce. You are making a fraudulent claim. You are basically falsifying a public document, and yet prosecution of these cases seem to be non-existent. Therefore, there is a need to protect you. Legal assistance. People who don't speak Japanese, who don't read Japanese, they are in a quandary. I showed you consultation data, but this is just a small percentage, I would say. Many other people are suffering in silence, and probably they just couldn't do anything. They just went out back to the Philippines or another country because they couldn't do anything. So assistance is very much important. And again, the legal mechanism. How are you going to simplify such mechanism in order that they can be accessed and can be used to protect the rights of these people? And I think this is where, again, the disadvantaged people have a big, big problem. Now, another point is information dissemination. I think this should be done by the government as well as by the non-governmental institutions, by the international centers. But also, this is not only for those former spouses, the victims, but it's also for the Japanese public. I've heard earlier about the culture, about the public support. At least in these cases that I've mentioned, the family of the husband who disappeared was supportive, but that is not happening in all cases. There's still kind of silence among the public about these cases. Okay, and then finally, support for spouses and the children as victims. Okay, so anyway, that's the end of my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so well, we have only 1 hour left for everybody else to talk and provide their opinions. And I had a lot of questions and a lot of people contacted me who wanted their opinions to be shared. So I will ask the rest of our panelists maybe to just shrink a bit your presentations to 8 minutes, from 10 to 8 minutes. Yes, I will probably start from Alison. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you. Just give me a second to share my screen. So I think you can see, I hope you can see it now. Thank you all so much for being here. It's truly my honor to be part of this panel. My name is Allison Alexi. I'm an associate professor at the University of Michigan. And as you heard, I have done a little, I'm in the process of writing a book on parental abduction in Japan. I'd be happy to condense my part of this conversation, because I'm really thrilled to be on this panel with all these wonderful experts and people who are willing to be so honest and share really difficult, very true, but very difficult experiences that they've had. I know that we're all learning a lot. I certainly am. I want to start by just sort of highlighting 3 things that I'd like to do very briefly in this talk. I want to talk a little bit about the legal structures in Japanese family law, especially, and what that enables, restricts, or allows. So in any culture, of course, any legal system, there are legal structures, and some legal structures in the family law system in Japan are really particularly pushing for particular things. And in other cases, they're just sort of, it's letting things happen. The second is just to talk very briefly about cultural norms that influence the structures and the patterns that we're talking about tonight around international divorce and child abduction, parental abduction. So I'm not trying to say, I do not want to say, and I do not believe, I think Vincent said this nicely at the very beginning, this is not at all a uniquely Japanese problem. This is not something that is caused by Japanese culture. However, there are legal and social and cultural forms that make some sort of particular differences or particular iterations in this case. So another way to say it is, in every culture, frankly, in every family, there are always complex tensions between what is good for the family in general and what is good for a particular family member. So this is not particular to divorce at all. For instance, we can imagine a situation where spouses each have a job and they have to decide, one spouse gets a new job and they have to decide, is the family going to move to support that position or not, right? You can certainly imagine children who are dropped off at school earlier in the morning because they need to be there so the parents can get to jobs, something like that, right? We're all constantly negotiating these kinds of tensions between what is good for me as an individual and what is good for the family, and we're balancing those. The trick is, the thing that I really want to highlight as my main point is that the legal system also imagines these tensions between what is good for an individual family member and what is good for a family in general. And legal systems make choices about emphasizing who should get priority, or whose rights or whose interests or whose needs, frankly, should get priority. That's also something that we heard earlier from both of the parents on the panel, thinking about when children's rights and when children's needs are prioritized or not, especially in the Japanese system. So just to give you a little bit of background, my perspective on these questions comes from research I've done. I'm trained as a cultural anthropologist. My research is primarily centered in Japan. Here is a book I published a couple years ago called Intimate Disconnections. I share it because thankfully there is an open access version of the book available. That means it's free to download as a full PDF. So if you'd rather buy the paper book, of course you can do that, but it is freely available. So if you're interested, please feel free to download it, check it out, reach out to me if you have any comments or questions. I should also say that in the next month, a Japanese translation of the same book with a slightly different title, which is going to be published in Japanese by Misuzu Publisher. Takeshi Hamano, Professor Takeshi Hamano, who I believe is with us in the audience tonight, has very kindly worked tremendously hard to make a translation. So I'm really grateful to him, and I'm looking forward to having a sort of larger audience in Japanese. This book is not open access, but I hope some people still might be interested in picking it up. I think Vincent alluded to this earlier too, but you might have seen a poll came out. This is in the Mainichi, here's the Japanese version, and here's the English version of the same story, saying that in a national survey, 50% of respondents said that children should be raised by both parents after divorce in Japan. Just so you get the details, this is a survey of about 3,000 people aged 18 or older. They are not people themselves who have been divorced necessarily, or whose parents have been divorced. This is supposed to be sort of a random sample of Japanese citizens. And what, of course, is interesting and important about this is, although many different surveys have these kinds of responses, when you ask people in Japan, they say it's better for children to be raised by both parents, even after divorce. In practice, this is not always the case. It's much less common for children to see both parents on a regular basis after divorce. Partially, to go back to my sort of point about legal structures, partially this is because, as you probably know, there is no joint legal custody in Japan after divorce. There is joint custody when parents are married. Both parents have custody of their child or children, but after divorce, they don't. There is a gender difference that has shifted. You can see this graph goes from 1950 to 2015, and you can see that mothers are increasingly likely to be given legal custody. Part of what I want to emphasize, and I think is really important, if you take nothing from my little presentation except for this, people do all sorts of things beyond legal structures. So even though you can see here that 80% of custody after divorce is being granted to mothers, there are many, many divorced families in Japan who figure out a way to share custody. I call this de facto shared custody. So what I'm trying to say here is the legal structure certainly has an influence, But there are many families, many really loving, wonderful parents, many children, many grandparents, extended families, family members, right, who are working so hard to figure out a way to sustain contact between even the non-custodial parent and their children. So I'm not trying to say that the legal structure is like a cookie cutter that's forcing people to do things, but that it does have significant influence. While we're talking about graphs, I just wanted to show you. So this is a number, the bars are the total number of of divorces over time from basically the post-war period. And you can see the marriage rate, which is the dotted line, is sort of falling, and then the divorce rate is slowly increasing. So one of the really important details that makes Japan different is this is the percentage of children born to unmarried parents. Japan is actually incredibly unique in this way. You can see Japan is at the very bottom. This graph is bar chart is a little bit old, it's from 2007, but the numbers are actually still very similar. So less than 3% of children born in Japan are born to an unmarried parent. So there is still, when we look at graphs like this about child custody after divorce, we understand that's capturing almost all of the children born in Japan precisely because of this, because children in Japan are born to married parents to an extraordinary degree compared to other wealthy industrialized nations. One of the patterns that's important when we think about cultural norms as opposed to legal structures is a pattern that I call the clean break after divorce. So you might know this, that former Prime Minister Koizumi was married and had 2 sons already born, and his wife at the time was pregnant with their 3rd son when they decided to get divorced. It was officially a mutual divorce. And Mr. Koizumi got custody of the older sons, and his ex-wife got custody of the son that she was still carrying that she had not yet given birth to. And at least in public media, there is no contact between the mother and her older 2 sons or the father and his youngest son. They have different last names. The older 2 sons are, of course, celebrities or politicians, sort of politician celebrities. And I use this as an example because Koizumi is, of course, a very prominent, relatively conservative politician. And this kind of custody arrangement has not seemingly caused him trouble, socially speaking or politically speaking. And this is something that I'm not arguing that, or don't believe that most people in Japan think that this is necessarily the best way to organize custody after divorce. Certainly, they got divorced in 1983, so it's a little bit older now. But I am arguing that this is a recognizable cultural norm, right? And most importantly, even as practices and norms shift, so even as people in families make different choices, this clean break mentality remains the legal standard. The legal system, the family law system in Japan right now retains this kind of clean break mentality as an ideal, even when individual people don't agree and make very different choices. So you might already know this, but let me just say it really clearly. If parents are able, divorced parents, I should say, are able to work out another agreement, if they can figure out a way to share custody, nothing in the Japanese legal system will stop them. So if you can come up with your own system, if you share custody, if you share summer vacations, anything like that, the legal system will not stop you. But if divorced parents look to the legal system for help, the parents, the families that cannot come to an agreement on their own for any number of reasons, the legal system constructs this clean break as a necessary solution. So the people, the families, the couples, the spouses who need the most help are being forced into this kind of clean break as the only option that the legal system firmly supports. So again, when you have, this is a different, this is actually a TV show survey that says 77% of people, it's completely unscientific, right? But people say that there should be joint custody in Japan, but in practice, again, from about 10 years ago, less than 25% of children have visitation with their non-custodial parent. That was my last slide. I'm sorry if I went over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. I'm sorry for making everybody rush. Okay, I will ask next Milos to comment, and probably Milos, I asked Milos to comment more from migration point of view, so we have a bit of mix up of ideas and perspectives here. Okay, Milos.
Okay, thank you very much. I start my timer so I know the time, and I try to be short. So as already Victoria said, my field of studies, migration, ethnicity, and race issues, particularly in the context of the European migration to Japan. So I'll be commenting from that perspective. And first of all, I would like to thank Vincent and Karin for sharing their experience as a parent in international marriage. I can really relate to these issues, although I'm not luckily having troubles yet. But yeah, it was very interesting and devastating at the same time to hear the stories. So I would just like to comment on one of the issues that actually Vincent raised in the beginning, when he started to say that actually this is not an issue that it's very gendered or is particular to race or ethnicity or nationality, right? And I completely agree with that, because I think it's very important to stress this, that this is not an issue that's particular to international marriages, that this is an issue which is actually very general issue in the context of the Japanese society, right? How the divorces works and so on and so on. But at the same time, I would like to emphasize that it is also a gendered and ethnic issue and nationality, and there is a layer of difficulty which is particular to the international marriages and the divorces in these cases as well. I think it was highlighted in Jeff's presentation as well, but I would like to comment on this in a more general terms. So these two cases clearly demonstrate that the current legislation, and particularly the lack of joint custody, which Alison was commenting on as well, can have highly adverse effects on parents and their children and extended families. So many people being involved in that process. But I would like to emphasize that there is a more kind of difficulty, extra layer of difficulty in the context of international marriages. So first of all, foreign nationals can be disadvantaged, right? And that was very clear from the presentation by Jeff as well. So there are visa issues, there are language skill issues, and related to the lack of information or access to information. But there is also a lack of cultural or social capital, lack of academic resources, or the issues of dependency on the spouse, lack of safety networks provided by their families, extended families, which are not always here. Especially in the case of Europeans, there is this argument that the spouses, they do not have access or do not participate in ethnic networks. So these safety nets are even weaker in that cases as well. And there is also gendered views in the Japanese society, and they are often intersecting with the racialized views of different ethnic or racial minorities in Japan. So this is and this can become a disadvantage as well. And last but not least, there is a psychological pressure from being a foreign in a disadvantaged situation. This is an issue that just hasn't been talked about a lot previously, but recently during the coronavirus, since there is a lot of adverse psychological effects on the masses, it has started to be noticed as well. And I think it's really important to realize that as well. And in the case of these cross-border or international marriages, there is this extra difficulty because both parents might be residing in Japan, but they might not be residing in Japan, right? Moreover, beside the parents, there is this extended family on the part of the foreign spouse who are not in Japan in most cases, right? And their access to their family members, the children, is even more limiting. And again, especially during the coronavirus and pandemic and these very strict travel restrictions on the side of Japan, there's this issue how we can actually secure rights of parents being stuck abroad, but also the families, extended families, to have access to, let's say, their grandchildren and so on and so on. And this is something that which is very particular to international marriages, not solely, but in most cases, it's international marriages which are affected. And gender ideology and families, that's something that Alison was commenting on. But of course, in the case of international marriages, when one spouse is a foreigner and one spouse is Japanese, these gendered views of roles within the family and the views of the families are often being contested, right? But the disadvantage that is that in the case of the divorce, the local gendered views and local family views are being applied, right? So the views by the other parent are not being considered to the extent which should be, let's say, fair in the process of the divorce. And finally, the final point is that the foreign spouses always are seen as a different part of Japanese society. They're always seen as they have a place to return to. They have a home that's elsewhere, which is not always true, right? In the case of Vincent, I think that he's more at home. It seems to me that he might be more at home and also Karin more at home here as somewhere else. But there is this view from the Japanese society. This is a comment that I'm always getting from my interviewees, that they feel that they are being seen in that way and that they are always going to be not fully integrated in Japanese, in the Japanese society. So this very, very general kind of perception can be transformed also into legislation procedures, to the divorce courts, and so on and so on. And we have to think about the ways how these kind of stereotypes are going to be avoided, how the rights of these disempowered people could be secured, right? Japan is very infamous for lack of protection of the foreign nationals in terms of we still have no anti-discrimination legislation, sufficient anti-discrimination legislation. So we need to raise the point. It's also necessary to be aware of this lack of protection of the foreign nationals and how this could possibly affect the divorce cases as in general, right? So, and the final point that we just related to a bigger issue of dealing with the diversity in Japan in general terms, and this is, again, I would like to use Vincent's kind of point of view, that this is not necessarily an issue of ethnic or racial diversity, right? Diversity in general terms within the Japanese people as well. So there is a long history and a long discussion about these Nihonjinron theories, the Nihon Bunkaron or Nihonjinron theories, which are seen as a very oppressive ideology on for Japanese nationals as well. So I think that it was very interesting when Vincent mentioned his hunger strike and how many people were actually interested in it and how many people actually realized that this is an issue. And this is something that can be done in a different way, right? So from the perspective of international marriages, as a person who has a different background and knows things, how things can be done in a different way, I think it's very important to raise the awareness. And again, it doesn't have to be a foreigner which can raise that awareness, but it's easier for a foreigner like you or Karin to raise the awareness and raise the issue of the diversity within the Japanese society in general. So I think that's just the brief comments from my side. It's already 8 minutes, so I will end here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Milos. And I will ask Watanabe-san next. And yep, so 8-10 minutes, please.
Okay, so I try to skip some of my explanation to shorten my statement. And so you gave me the Mrs. Kim, you gave me 3 questions. So I try to answer the 3 questions. So one by one. First, how did I become involved in the topic of divorce in Japan? Actually, my daughter was abducted by my ex-wife in 2010 when I was a deputy mayor in Osaka, seconded by my ministry. After my daughter was abducted, I tried to take back my daughter and to get her custody at court. I won my divorce case at family court and got my daughter's custody by promising that I will let my ex-wife to see my daughter for more than 100 days a year if I won this case and got her custody. The judge at the family court admitted it was appropriate to give me the custody of my daughter in terms of her interest, because she could see both parents at least 100 days a year. Unfortunately, the judges at High Court overturned the family court decision and my ex-wife got my daughter's custody. And Supreme Court rejected my appeal and the High Court decision was finalized. Then, as it's expected, I haven't seen my daughter for more than 11 years and cannot know where my daughter is and whether she's still alive or not. And the second question, what are the underlying political issues of divorce in Japan? From this experience and my working experience as governmental official, I found that there are at least three groups in Japan which get the benefit from this current divorce system. The three groups, the one is the judges, and the second, the two is the attorneys, the lawyers, and the three is the would-be feminist group, advocacy groups. I skipped the explanation how they get the benefit. Instead, I would like to let you know the movie I presented in the diet. So someone uploaded the video. So and you can see my homepage, the someone homepage, yes. And someone uploaded the statement I made on the diets. So you can see the movie and then so you can understand what is going on in Japan and then who get the benefit from this child abduction issue. And also, if you can read Japanese, I hope you to read this book. It's explain the mechanism, the political mechanism and the legal mechanism to how the three groups get the benefits from this business. So, okay, and yes, and so in this book, it is explained the false DV claim, why the false DV claims is made to get the child custody. Okay, and the reason why this issue is not solved is that those three groups prevent the current system changing. They say a lot of things as excuse to keep this system, like protecting the DV victims, blah, 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 blah. But the true reason for them to keep this system is to keep their benefit. In other words, keep their parental child abduction business, as Karina said. They took over Japanese government and maintained the current system. For example, the Family Law Subcommittee of the Legislative Council was set up by Ministry of Justice last year. The main members of the committee belong to the three groups. Who selected the member? The judges. In Japan, there is a custom that judges are seconded to Ministry of Justice. they usually come back to judicial branch and promote to high-ranking judges. As stated before, they also be a member of Legislative Council, which legislates a draft of law. The members of the Diet usually pass the draft of the law without any change. It means that the judges dominate judicial branch, administrative branch, and legislative branch. Such custom is clearly against the principle of separation of power, and it's clearly unconstitutional. But such kind of custom is now very popular in Japan. With lack of check and balance, the judges abuse their power and nobody can stop their activities. The subcommittee will write a report this spring. It is said the subcommittee will conclude the joint custody system should not be introduced. The second, number two, the enforcement system to collect child support payment from the separated parents should be introduced. Number three, a supervised visitation system applied for all separated parents should be introduced. If such report will be issued and the law based upon this report will be passed in the Diet, all parents who lose custodies after divorce are obliged to use supervised visitation system if they would like to see their children. So every parent and children will be under control of the judges after divorce. While this system will give enormous damage for the people, it will give much more benefit to the three groups. That's why they oppose to introduce joint custody system and the visitation system like other countries. Needless to say, in foreign country, non-Japanese country, both parents can see their children for more than 100 days a year without supervisor. And the third question, what can be done to solve the issue? To solve the issue is therefore to interfere the discussion of the subcommittee and kick out the judges, attorneys, and would-be feminists from the committee as soon as possible. Many Japanese politicians and government officials, including me, have fought to exclude the three groups from the government, but we are defeated by those three groups. Those three groups are very, very powerful. So the support from outside is essential to solve this issue. I wish the international community to make pressure, strong pressure against Japanese government to exclude those three groups from the discussion at the subcommittee. And if the subcommittee will issue, the member of the subcommittee will be replaced, and then the subcommittee became a good committee, then it will issue the report to introduce the joint custody system and oblige the parents who take care of the children to allow 100 days visitation without any supervisor for the other parents. Then I think this issue will be solved. From my experience to fight against those groups for 11 years, there is no way to solve this issue but to change the legal and political structure in Japan. As Vincent stated, there is no structure to prevent a parent-child abduction. So it is necessary to change the structure, I think. That's my statement. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Watanabe-san. And last but not least, Alexandra.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'll try to be quick. So first of all, how did I get involved in this topic? Well, it's mainly due to my colleague, Dr. Victoria Kim. Well, as I came to Osaka University, I became, well, exposed to her topic, and I thought that this is an interdisciplinary topic. So you can basically study this from political, social, economic, legal, diplomatic, even psychological aspect, I believe. And another reason is that for somebody who comes from highly legal and political background and studies top decision making, this is an opportunity for me to engage more with people and well, give back to society more with what I study and what I learn about. So from my area of expertise, I would like to underline, well, 3 problems, and I will not repeat what other panelists have already talked about. So first, this is a security issue, and there is an issue of how this is governed by the Japanese government. And what I mean by this is that, first of all, Japan does a lot to provide security. And here I'm talking about human security, right? Security centered around people around the world, because it provides a lot of aid to economic development, or it's engaged in providing humanitarian aid. All this is nice and well. However, this framework of human security and protection of individuals loses its force within its borders. And here, because we talked about, this is not just something that affects foreigners, this is an issue that can also and does affect Japanese nationals. So here we talk about actually the system that creates more insecurity for the users of the, let's say, legal system, because this is what is the first responsibility of the state order, although here we are talking about international. That is all, again, nice and well, international law. However, state remains the main screen through which individuals can actually use and claim their rights, as Jeff's presentation talked about. So this is the one interesting point, I think, and that's something that should be, I think, talked about more. And of course, here, international divorce is just one of the case studies. We can talk even about refugees, but that's not the topic of this panel. So in that sense, for example, because Japanese family law in some ways makes foreigners who are married to Japanese nationals an external party, right, to that law. And especially if we look at the Koseki system, well, only Japanese can basically, Japanese nationals can be head of the unit, right? Foreigners cannot form their own units, and children cannot belong to 2 different units, which is particularly problematic in the event of divorce. And direct consequence of that is that, well, foreign spouses, well, even we see even some Japanese, but also children are vulnerable groups. So that's one point, the first point. The second one is legal issue. So it's not that we don't have laws in place, we do. And we talk about international divorce, we talk about actually international, not only Japanese family law, but we talk about international private law, which is the law that regulates conflicts of laws, because we have 2 spouses of different nationalities, and even they might live in, not only in Japan, they might live abroad. So there is this idea which law applies. And just to make a little bit things clearer, for example, we mentioned a convention on the abduction. That's the part of the international, for example, private law. However, we have another layer that is human rights law, and that's what also Jeff's presentation talked about. And interestingly, Japan is a party to all these different conventions that should provide all these different sorts of protection to not only both spouses, because I mean, I'm not just going to the convention, but both spouses should have equal rights in divorce, number one. And we have child convention that many of you mentioned, that should actually and gives right to children to maintain contact with both parents on a regular basis, to benefit from child support. So these are some things that actually are not then supported by Japanese law. So this is the main disconnect. And if you look at Japanese legal system, actually international treaties should directly be applied into their domestic system. However, in practice, again, that's not the case. And this is the main difficulty. And just to give you an example, So this child convention, not child abduction convention, that Japan became party in 2014, and created this mechanism where we have Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the unit within that actually helps people, should help actually people who are demanding the return of their kids, actually makes the application of this convention almost impossible. So the process is very slow. I will not go into details, but usually a case of the left behind parents basically expire after 1 year because the child already got accustomed to life in Japan. So this is something that is very important and should be talked about. There are some reforms, but they're not substantial. They're not actually resolving. So we have this issue of pretense. So yes, we have norms, and then we have the actually true intent, which is actually a little bit seems that Japanese government is applying these norms in, if I can say, bad faith. And the third issue, the final issue, is a diplomatic issue, because I'm somebody who studied diplomacy. So this is of particular interest to me. For example, other states pressured Japan to become a party to this abduction convention, which resulted in the access in 2014. So one possible way would be for those governments to actually press more Japan in their talks, because they're always in bilateral or multilateral talks to bring this up more. And another thing is reputational cost for Japan, because Japan is qualified as a rule breaker because of human rights, well, non-compliance. So this can be something that could, over a long run, force Japan to make some changes. And you can see even recently with very tight border controls, that's another thing that puts Japan in a negative spotlight when it comes to human rights. And now just to talk about, in the end, possible approaches to this problem, because I don't think there are magical solutions and we still need to be very realistic. So first of all, I think we need to rely on weak solutions. And I think, first of all, we need to basically change mentalities of people, still talk about this more and organize round tables like this and include more expert, meaning maybe even talk about psychological distress that this can create for kids, etc. But also strengthen the prevention system. I think this is very important. Maybe we cannot immediately resolve this issue now and help immediately people who are already in this problem, but we can signal and alert people who might deal with this problem. And another thing is that, as Watanabe-san talked about, the Japanese government, this is very difficult. The political decision-making in Japan is very centralized, is very rigid, and does not include other structures such as civil society or different groups, even scholars, into the conversation. So the governance is another problem that I think, but that will not happen overnight. That's very difficult. So I think there are different paths through which we can work towards this, to approach this issue, and maybe at least at the beginning get these joint custody rights. That would also be helpful. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. And so from now, I'll open room for everybody talk, but please not at the same time. And if you would like to ask questions, maybe raise your hand. And while you are thinking, if you want to comment on somebody else's comment, you're totally welcome. Use and for our attendees, please use Q&A session. But I will start asking some questions that I prepared for today, and just to and while everybody else is catching up. Well, first question to probably I'll ask from Alexandra. I think in many cases, when it comes to international marriages, there is this idea that prenuptial or postnuptial agreement, as it was in Karina's case, would help and save spouses. And as we saw in Karina's case, it is not working. So any thoughts on this idea, why it's not working, and what is there any way on how to make it work?
Okay, so there are two different things. First of all, if we talk about prenup agreements, they're not common in Japan. So in case couples want to do that, so before they get married, they actually need to hire a lawyer and decide actually in case of divorce, which court in which country should have actually jurisdiction to decide on the matter. Now that means that also for Japanese context, we need to have a Japanese local lawyer that would actually adjust the text, because those prenup agreements can be very lengthy to Japanese context. So I think that's one thing, right? Another thing is that I think in Karina's case, and from what she said, I don't think that was a prenup agreement. Prenup agreement regulates the division of assets after divorce. But here, custody, I don't think that is something that can be regulated by and through private contracts. Another thing is possibly why courts do not take into account those contracts is not necessarily because they're against the law and they're not within the law, but it's because they can violate what is called public policy. So divorce in Japan is something that it's not illegal, but it's considered to be contrary to the public policy. So the judge saying, yes, I will enforce this would mean that he promotes divorce. So everybody would start doing this. And this is not something that is desirable outcome. So this is an explanation. So these are the contracts that violate public policy, but not necessarily laws. And I don't think that this can be regulated through private contracts. So that's the explanation why it doesn't work.
Okay, Vincent, you would like to?
Thank you. I think to what Alexandra said, I think, the biggest, there are two issues in Japan. The first one is that the Japanese court do not want to create precedents and at any cost. So if you have an international person that tries to bring a bit more legitimacy to the battle, or more rights, to the children to the table, that doesn't pan out well, because then they would create a precedent that people would actually try to leverage. And we saw it in Watanabe-san's case, who actually tried to use the friendly parental rule, which was the foundation of the revision of the civil code. The revision of the civil code back in 2011. And the family court agreed to his approach by saying, yes, we should actually grant custody to the parent who's the most friendly among the two. But then the judge in the High Court did not want to create a precedent. And there was a huge pressure in a legal environment where, I believe his wife's side was represented by dozens of lawyers, literally. Because you do not want to create a precedent. The other issue is also the rule of law. The rule of law is not a concept in Japan. So Japan ratifies all these treaties, but has no intent in respecting them. And I'm not here, to badmouth the Japanese authorities in any ways, but for example, Japan ratified the United Convention on the Right of the Child in 1994. It has yet to ratify its protocol. So in other words, Japan ratifies all these treaties to come across as a nation, as a developed nation with a modern justice system, but it has no intention in respecting them. Otherwise, you would actually ratify this protocol that would allow them to be sued in case of a violation of this treaty. And this is why when we did the complaint against Japan for gross violation of human rights at the Human Rights Council, it was the only way we could actually take Japan in front of the United Nations, because with all the other treaties, the International Covenant on Human Rights, so on and so forth, Japan is actually disregarding these treaties, and you can bring them in front of a court in Japan and have no intent on respecting them. To give you an even more shocking behavior from the Japanese authorities is the Vienna Convention on Consular Protection, signed in 1963, which in the case of international divorces applies very well. The Article 36 of that convention stipulates that sending government can request access to the citizen to Japan, for example, on any given time. On 5 occasions, the French consulate has tried to reach out to my wife, her lawyer, to be able to merely assert whether the children were alive or not. And in my case, we even have child abuse evidences, which is one of the aspects of the Interpol arrest warrant, The Japanese, so my wife refused, and the French consulate contacted the game show and home show, so the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Justice of Japan, telling them it was their right to meet the children. And the Japanese authorities have refused, they have blocked access to the French authorities to visit their citizens. So, and in a way also the rule of law is very satisfactory. The law in Japan are already satisfactory. Japan ratified that Convention on the Rights of the Child, which stipulates that a child should be able to maintain personal and regular contact with their parents. When you bring that in front of the Japanese court, the judge will rule that it's in the interest of the child to not see the parent they have been abducted from, because then it creates tension. This is absolutely, you know, they literally go against the treaties that they sign. And the problem, and I agree that, you know, foreign pressure has to be applied. And it is being applied by the, you know, as we could see with the EU resolution, the Congress in the United States is drafting a bill to make sure that to implement, to force the application of the Goldman Act on countries that are not respecting the Hague Convention on International Abduction. The problem is that Japan doesn't care about that. So what do? You know, you cannot bring an aircraft carrier in the Bay of Tokyo and put military pressure on Japan. You know, Japan is a G7 country and it has to start acting as such. So your word is your bond. And this is the problem that we have with Japan, is that unless there are actual sanctions, Japan has demonstrated that it has no intent in respecting the treaties that it's part of. So one of the anger that I've been working on for the last 4 years is to actually put pressure on France, because I'm French, to put pressure on Japan. So I'm trying to twist the French authorities' arms so that they can actually put pressure on Japan. And one of the ways to do that is to force France to put the French authorities in a position where they have no choice but to take Japan to the International Court of Justice. Because only a country can actually take another country to the International Court of Justice, but they've refused to do so. So now what we have to do as foreign citizens is to actually threaten our own government to take action. Otherwise, they would actually be even responsible. The Committee on the Rights of the Child of the United Nations ruled in November of 2020 that the obligation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child apply not only to the states where the children live, but also to the sending states. So in other words, in my case, for example, France has the same responsibility as Japan to make sure that the rights of my children as stipulated in the Convention on the Rights of the Child are applied in Japan on my half French children.
Thank you very much, Vincent. I will continue to, I didn't see many questions there, and I see that a lot of you are responding. Thank you very much for that. Another issue, well, just quick comment. I was talking to a couple of persons, both of them. One of them is Japanese national who was living with his Japanese wife in Spain, actually, and his wife actually returned to Japan, and then they lost contacts. And his current situation is that he's back to Japan, but still is not able to see his daughter. And when I asked, what have you done? And the idea here around Japanese who are in this sort of situation is that they do not want to go to the court. Well, his first argument was that, well, he doesn't want his child to suffer from all the issues that will happen when there is court hearings, and whether his wife will feel will be psychologically stable and it will not affect the child. And another idea is that it's not really helpful, and there is like disbelief in the system. And another person that I talked to, his child was taken by his wife just last November. And like in order, like when he tried to communicate like and to negotiate the like visitation rights, the spouse requested money, and like, so it's actually it becomes like the child became a hostage of like of the wife, and the idea here is like you would meet your child only if you pay money, right? But then it is actually, well, it's actually penal code, and it's it should be penalized, but it's not. As long as it is mother, then it is okay. If Alison or Jeff can comment on where spouses can go to receive any help, because I saw in Alison's book about these counseling groups, and Jeff, you work with many foreign nationals, where they can go, like even Japanese nationals, if it is Japanese endogamous, Japanese couple, is there any support for them?
All right, so me first, okay. Well, in Japan, you have international centers supported by the local government. At least they can provide you with information. They can provide you with information on where you can get some legal assistance, including, for example, hoteras, or they can provide you with this yorisoi system where they can allow you to talk to somebody using the phone. So one. The other, of course, are the non-governmental organizations, NPOs. Watanabe-san is quite critical of some of them, but some of them are also very helpful because they understand the situation of the non-Japanese residents, and therefore they can very well find a way to give psychological support, to even provide financial or housing or protection, including the church, because in some cases, especially for Filipinos, a lot of support was coming from the church and the institutions inside the church. Alison, please.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, you know, I think now that it's more possible to sort of basically Google or do a quick internet search in different languages. I know it's true in English. I think it's true in other languages as well. So I've heard from people who have talked to me that basically after their child is abducted, the first search is something like basic keywords like resources, child kidnapping, parent, something like that. And I think a lot of NGOs are visible. And Jeff, you would mention this, but you know, part of what's tricky is that there is such a complicated ecosystem of NGOs in Japan, internationally, and my sense of them is that they have maybe different perspectives or different attitudes. Frankly, some of them don't agree, which is fine. You know, everybody's human and that's fine, but there's I think significant disagreement between different groups about strategies, about how to respond. And so I think it is a really complicated system that would be difficult to navigate for anyone, let alone someone who is, you know, in a deeply traumatic moment. So I think there probably could be more, but compared to when I started this project many years ago, a number of years ago, I think there are more people and more sort of easily searchable things. I haven't tried in Russian, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure if that's true for all languages, but certainly for the languages I can read.
I just wanted to add, because if this individual has its child kidnapped, it has to contact his government because they have to send a request for return to Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There is a unit there for consular affairs. So I would say that because time is crucial here and they need to capitalize on that. So although chances are slim, but still it's worthwhile trying.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to add, I think it was in Milo's presentation, one of the cases that I'm helping these days is when the husband is a Japanese national and the wife is foreigner, but it works the other way around as well. The idea is that, well, I don't want to live with you anymore, so you can go back to your country. And that was like, that's a very widespread idea. And I think many foreign spouses are not protected as long as they do not have permanent residents in Japan or Japanese, or if they did not naturalize in Japanese citizenship, then they cannot even stay in Japan. And in this current coronavirus situation, it gets even worse, like, because they can never even travel to Japan if they lose their visa. And yes, so I wanted to comment on this. And also, I wanted to ask, we have only 3 minutes left, and I wanted to quickly ask Watanabe-san, you worked as government official, now you work as university lecturer. Is there any way how to bring this information, how to spread this information, how to deliver the ideas to both sides, and how to make maybe some steps towards easing it up or making it better?
Okay, can I answer your question first? Yes, and it's very difficult to spread the right information for the government because the three groups, as mentioned, is very strong power, and then they manipulate the information and they block the information which is unsuitable for them for the public. And so, but I think that by way of the international community, like United Nations or like the other foreign countries, to ask the Japanese government directly to criticize. There is a huge breach of the human rights happening in Japan, and then a lot of the citizens in foreign countries suffered from such a bad system. And then the Japanese government has to face to the problem, and also the Japanese media has to broadcast this kind of the situation. That's, I think, the very effective way to change this legal and the political system.
Okay, thank you very much. And well, I will quickly try to wrap up this conversation. I guess 2 hours is never enough, and it should be continuous conversation about this. Well, one thing that what I've learned by preparing for this roundtable is that awareness and role models are very important in this situation. And I think Vincent's activism really helped a lot of Japanese parents to get active and actually mobilize their forces to fight for their rights. And I hope that will help with breaking this cycle. And also information support. And I guess I haven't seen in recent years many panels that would discuss this, and I think a lot of informational support is needed. And what I see from my own research is that a lot of Russian women, they usually rely on Russian networks, and the first thing that they go and talk about this. And it is good that they rely on the Russian networks, but I think there should be more conversations with local people because everybody who I talk to, when they talk about their problems, they say, well, my case is different. And I see a lot of cases that are similar, but they kind of, because of them not knowing about other cases, they think that their case is very unique, but it is usually not. So this information support is important. And one very interesting and creative approaches to joint custody that I noticed was in Allison's book, actually, where there is spouses came up with the idea of shared and joint custody, there is Shinken and Kaigoken. And that I think, like, I will not explain it now. If you're interested, it's in open access. Please read it, chapter 3, I think, or 4. So the idea there was that one parent would hold legal custody over the child, and another one would hold decision-making ideas on the everyday basis, and so both parents can participate. But of course, this happens when like spouses are on good conditions and can communicate with each other, and of course when both spouses are in the same country. And well, as academia, we probably, like, I teach courses on marriage and on migration. So I'm trying to implement these ideas and discuss these ideas with my students. So maybe for academic people who, like, I saw there were a lot of people from universities who registered for this roundtable, to raise awareness among students and educate them about the divorce issues and international marriages and divorces and how they affect people, and all participating parties. And it is not only parents and children, it's also extended members of the family. I will finish here, and thank you very much for everybody again for participating in today's roundtable. And yes, big applause to everybody. And if you are interested in participating in Vincent's like NGO, please message him directly. He posted his email in the chat. I will, for those attendees who are still here, we will send with Sasha and I, we will send message about the NGO information. And so if you're interested, please contact Vincent directly or contact us so we can introduce you or provide you extra information. So thank you very much again. I'll stop recording here.